Games are a difficult medium to make a successful, fully realized product in. They've really come a long way, and a lot more complexity has been added since the era of jumping on 8-bit turtles and hitting question mark blocks back on the NES. These games can hit so many marks and achieve such great things, but really just fall short where it matters, or even completely fall short regardless of how much money these huge corporations spend to prop up the game. Turtle Rock Studios is no stranger to having their games fall short of their intent and really miss the mark. Rest in peace, our Lord and Savior Evolve 2, you live on forever in our loving memory. But Turtle Rock Studios aren't a rookie studio by any means, with their work on some major titles in the past 20 years actually looking rather impressive on paper. However, with their newest release Back 4 Blood being out for about a month now, the experience has come to a lot of mixed feedback in the online communities for it. There seems to be a consensus in the online space that the difficulty is too hard if you aren't playing with a crew of cracked and coordinated 13-year-olds hopped up on G Fuel whippets and lines of Adderall. As a primarily solo player, this is something I can overwhelmingly attest to affecting my experience in a negative way. Hi, I'm Mr. Spoon U2, and today we're going to be looking at Back 4 Blood and what it offers to you in terms of a full game package, and whether or not you'll probably be picking it up and or sticking with the game in the long term. The first thing we're going to be talking about today is the main mode multiplayer in Back 4 Blood and why it causes problems, as well as what it brings to the table in terms of benefits in longevity and replayability in the game. Back 4 Blood is a cooperative horde-based shooter where you get supply points after each successful mission completed, and you may return to base to buy cards for your custom-built decks that you take with you into each run from supply lines at base. Now, this raises a few problems in particular for the way that the game is designed, but in terms of how it's played in its main mode, which is multiplayer, it seems to fit in such a way that it would promote playing online and a positive online experience overall, which isn't actually realized, unfortunately, due to the way that the game's different elements interact with each other to form this complete package. Multiplayer being the main mode for this game is about par for the course in today's standard fare for video games. Mostly everything is online now and requires you to be playing with other people to see real benefits in what you're doing and to progress forward. However, Back 4 Blood completely removes all sorts of progression that you may or may not have had in single player for absolutely none. All of the cards are unlocked to you, and you can't gain any supply points, so actually trying to go and play the game, maybe even just get better with some of the weapons and stuff, doesn't benefit you in any way, doesn't make your character any better. Essentially, the only way to really progress and see true progression in this game is to play through multiplayer. And trying to trust your randoms to keep moving and not stand still just to kill everything in sight is a feat all on its own. And if I've learned anything from Destiny 2, no matter how much you type helpful things into the chat box, you just cannot fix stupid. Like, seriously, how do people suck so bad that it can take 2 hours and 45 minutes to do one Nightfall Strike, I swear? Anyways, back to the cooperative horde-based shooter genre. Oh wait, Destiny isn't that genre. Well, in terms of comparison to Back 4 Blood, Destiny's not that close. And as well, in the rest of the cooperative horde-based shooter space, I really want to avoid comparing Back 4 Blood to things like Left 4 Dead. Just because Back 4 Blood really does try to take so many different elements from so many different other games and make it its own, that it's come to almost a completely unique formula here that interacts with itself in its own strange ways. However, you cannot separate this game from other games that are in a similar design space just because of what it does end up being altogether in a complete package and what these other games offer you that's really similar. And like I was saying earlier, starting with its main mode being multiplayer, almost all of these horde-based cooperative shooters do offer some way to go and play something alone and not have you feel penalized, where you can still get progression and actually make meaningful advances to your gameplay state and actually power up your character. For example, take a game like Vermintide 2. It's also a cooperative horde-based shooter where 4 people run through a level, and at the end of the level they get rewards. Now, in terms of the main mode, when you get these rewards, you can see whether or not it powers your character up, and you know the power of your character going into a mission, and you maintain that level of power all the way through, keeping things very consistent. You have a consistent upgrade path. You can play alone and still get these rewards. In fact, it just definitely makes things harder because you have to work with bots. In Back 4 Blood, your only option to see this kind of progression, or any sort of progression for that matter, is to play multiplayer and deal with randoms, because you can't just shut off matchmaking and play by yourself, which you probably wouldn't want to anyways, because the bots in this game are absolutely detrimental to your gameplay experience. They are dumb, they can't actually help you in most situations, and they barely hold their own, just enough to make it through a level on easy. In fact, it's kind of pathetic, and they really don't help on harder difficulties at all. This means you can't even play the harder difficulties solo, which normally comes down to your allies in multiplayer actually being a detriment to you, not being able to focus the right targets, and not being able to continuously move through the level as you need to so that you can incur as little damage as possible. This is something that is core to any of these horde shooters, because the hordes never stop coming. There's actually an infinite number of enemies in these directories to keep being fed to you in most situations, and they will overpower you at some point. You have a limited number of meds, and you cannot lollygag and take your time doing things that aren't progressing through the level. A lot of people do have this problem, and most people will not actually act accordingly in order to progress past whatever point it is in the level. They will stop to kill everything, and this is a very consistent issue in the game. You need to kill and move, and if you can't, you need to just move. That is how all these games are designed, and this one is in fact no exception. It, however, does not play into the benefit of multiplayer. The primary way to earn rewards in this game is to actually, after finishing a mission, have the game tally up how many kills of Ridden you've gotten in the end game screen. That seems to be the most effective way to get the most points, so this encourages players, especially the ones who aren't as versed in these type of games, to sit still, shoot everything that you possibly can, and you'll get as many points by the end of the round as possible. This, however, is in direct conflict with actually wanting to move forward in the campaign and progress, whereas people are mostly looking just to get the supply points and actually upgrade their characters so that they can feel like they're improving in the game, instead of feeling like they're being put into an increasingly harder situation by playing through these campaigns, which also only have a limited number of continues in them. This continue system then becomes a problem because players are incentivized to leave after a single match, a single map, so that they can get their rewards and upgrade their characters after every single match. But this penalizes the host who makes the run, because you only get the 2 continues. You can only have 3 runs, and you can only select what seems to be certain starting points in the campaign so that you can actually attempt to move forward. But when people are leaving at the end of every single match, or not even joining in because the game won't matchmake them in halfway through the match for you, then suddenly the multiplayer starts to fall apart, and you can't actually get a consistent gameplay experience on what's supposed to be these long romping runs through the campaign. That's supposed to be, in fact, how you reach the end game there. And speaking of which, the end game for this game is pretty whack, if I'm being honest. Now, the way that I've described this game up till now is a cooperative horde-based shooter. And for all intents and purposes, this game really is that. But with the way that the elements all end up mixing together and actually coming together in the full and complete package, this game is more actually a roguelite experience, where you start off very weak, and you can almost look at any game like Hades, where you have almost nothing, you're pretty weak to start, and then as you begin progressing, you actually get stronger and stronger items to push further and further in, and this causes a whole swath of balance issues for this game, particularly because of the damage expectations and the expectations of the things that you have when you enter any given run. And because of these two facets, the game almost can't feel balanced when you're playing in the early game, especially with randoms. The specials have a lot of health and not very easily accessible weak spots, especially in terms of things like the tall boy, where you don't really get to shoot its weak spot until after it's tried to do its damage. But by that point, it's already taken a chunk of health off of you, and that's not something that you really felt like you could have countered unless your weapon just did more damage and you could have dropped him by yourself. This is a detriment to the game because the way that it progresses, you get better and better weapons as you go through these different runs on the campaign. And until you get to about a half to maybe fully kitted blue weapon or a base purple weapon, you realistically cannot drop the special infected within one magazine unless you have somebody helping you, or you can dump almost everything into one of their weak spots. But like I said, with the tall boys, you can't reach that weak spot, and for a lot of the other special infected, such as the exploder, there isn't a weak spot until after he's charged, and then it's in the middle of his body in the direction he's charging, so you have to be standing in the most dangerous spot so that you can actually attempt to kill it quickly, and if you have low damage weapons, you might as well not. So there's just quite a few problems with the way that the game is balanced and the way that it handles a lot of these things, because it doesn't let you actually make meaningful choices on your own that you can essentially solo carry people. Because in a game like this, you will often get people who are incompetent. And in games like Left 4 Dead or Vermintide 2, when everyone on your team dies, you do have that chance to actually make it through the mission. If not completely, at least to a point where you can get somebody back. However, in this game, if you were alone, I would almost guarantee that you're going to die. There's almost nothing that you can do to actually carry yourself to a point where you can make a meaningful difference and actually carry the game yourself. And this is very, very, very upsetting to anybody who can't always be playing with friends or people that they can constantly trust. In Left 4 Dead 2, the guns are the same damage from the beginning to the end. So when you enter those missions and those scenarios, you know exactly how many bullets it'll take to kill every time. You know exactly what's going on with every individual weapon. You know the feedback, you know what's going to happen. There's not a lot of variation like there is in this game with the attachments that make you have to learn a lot of different things about the different guns on the fly. However, this doesn't excuse the fact that the game isn't balanced around actually having people be able to put the game on their back when it is required of them. If a game requires this much strong coordination and consistent teamwork just to make it through the normal mode, then honestly, that's a bit of an issue. This makes the game an online progression-only roguelite with a continue system that penalizes the hosts with little to no incentive to stay and finish a run. They just send more special infected bullet sponges at you the longer a run goes on, and they get to deal their guaranteed damage to you since you can't hit their weak spots, or even if you can, such as something like the Hawker, they just get to spit their acid at you, deal their damage before they die, and you're stuck with that permanent loss of health, especially since there's trauma in this game, which keeps you from getting to full health once you've had enough damage for a sustained amount of time. And taking more damage while you're damaged increases your trauma, meaning you do permanently lose health if you don't manage to make it to these certain med stations constantly. All of this ends up putting so much force on people that it drives them to make an easier decision to just merely join a run, to do a single mission, get your supply points, leave, upgrade your character, and just go play another mission for fun. You don't actually try to complete the campaign or play through a segment of campaign missions in a run. You just get your rewards and get out while the getting's good. And this is a shame too, because one of the highlights of almost every roguelite or roguelike game is actually the end game. Once you make it to that end game portion, you actually get to start being that super powerful, badass character that you've been working so hard to get put together and assembled. And this game merely takes that all away from you, because as you progress to actually make yourself stronger through these runs by getting more cards in your pre-selected decks, all that ends up happening is they send more special infected at you, your team loses more health, and you guys fall further and further behind, to the point where at some point everybody gets overwhelmed and you don't get rewarded for being in a long run that fails. You only get rewarded for finishing a mission and having it be successful. So at the end of the day, it fails at what it's come together to do, which is provide an increasingly challenging experience. And with how long the campaign is set up, there's almost no way that they actually intend for you to play from beginning to end completely from Act 1 all the way to Act 3. You would have an obnoxious number of cards over the limit for your deck, and you wouldn't really be able to even, I think, deal with all the special infected that they would throw at you towards the end, unless everybody was, playing perfect, and they probably rebalanced some of these special affected to give you actual ways to take them out meaningfully. But until then, it's just going to be an experience where you get swamped by the end of every run. You aren't going to be able to actually finish, even on easy if you're playing with randoms at least. And at the end of the day, you're just not able to experience what the game is trying to offer at its highest level unless you really do spend all the time in the world to trick out your deck, make sure that you have all the top level cards that you need. You take the time to make sure that absolutely everything you're doing all the time is on point and you're covering for everybody all the time. And that's not what gaming is. Gaming is always about sitting down, having fun, enjoying the time that you're spending doing something that you couldn't ever really do in real life. At this point, it would be fair to think that I didn't like the game based on its fundamentally flawed mechanics and all the issues that I've listed so far. But you do get to feel like you're in a different world where you get to do things that you couldn't do here in the real world. You're really a cleaner running through some of those ridden infested towns and countrysides and completing objectives that help out what's left of humanity back at your fort. The issue is just the way that those central gameplay elements really tie in to make this feeling not consistent all the way through. And really, to sum it all up, it's that inconsistent because while you are playing as a zombie killing cleaner, just wiping ridden off of the streets, you really are at the whims of a broken reward system, a broken progression system, and a broken campaign system that all brings the worst out of every one of these individual systems to the forefront for you to focus on. and that doesn't do the game any favors when you really can have such fun moments even though there is so many things wrong with the game. This is a real shame because Turtle Rock Studios actually does quite a few things good here in this package that really do make the game feel rather awesome and like a great set piece for what they want to do. So they have the background work for what they want in this game. Really, they just need to iron out the systems underneath so that things can actually work as intended. And with that, I'll jump right into art and music, and to be frank, the game actually looks pretty good. It's nothing drop dead gorgeous, nothing completely stand out, but in terms of the co-op horde shooter space, it definitely is a standout in terms of actual graphical quality, and usually it's hard to put a lot of graphical quality into these games because they have to litter the screen with so many mobs that it'll tank frame rates quite a bit. And I honestly haven't seen very many, if any at all, real frame rate chugs while playing this game. I'm playing on a 2080 and a 2900X, so there shouldn't be any issues on my end. I mean, it's not the highest end hardware, but it's something that's solid enough that on my 1440p monitor, I usually don't see drops in any games, and this was no exception. Now, the music. There are some areas, like at Fort Hope, where the music is just unbearable, looped, and really gets on your nerves and makes you want to shut it off altogether. But then you end up in some of the levels, and you think, well, I might as well just turn some of the music back on. And I'll go ahead and give you a minute here to just listen to some of the ambiance of one of these sections that I ran into, where I had a fog card, and it actually ended up making the scene a little more scrambly, and the music definitely helped to reinforce that as we were walking through a little swampy type area, and it really played into itself.
Exploder there! Yeah!
The art direction here and some of the ways that the game really forces the atmosphere upon you really do make things feel different every run, especially with like what I was saying, fog card. There are these corruption cards that can alter the gameplay as you're going through. You can get stronger bosses and whatnot, but some of the ones that more affect the areas that you're in, I feel actually do a lot more. Like maybe if there was a rain card or a thunderstorm card or even a hurricane card, so that, you know, not to bring Left 4 Dead 2 directly into this, but that hard rain, oh man, that campaign was amazing as it got rainier and rainier as the hurricane was setting in, and then you got to take off in a flooded gas station on a boat. That was one of the best campaigns in that game, and some of it was because of that environmental difference. And yeah, you see the hurricane every time you go through, but because of the way that the game changes every time with those kinds of different storm elements, it almost feels unique every time you're running through those kinds of missions, and that's something that this game does lack. In terms of their character design, I'm not that big a fan of the survivors, actually. I feel like they're all, well, a bit generic if I'm being honest, and not only that, they really don't make you feel that different in between playing characters other than just, you know, kind of a stat change, and some of their unique abilities actually do feel rather, you know, impactful, such as Doc being able to heal people. Mom's instant res to a lesser extent feels rather impactful, but on a lot of these characters, like just dealing some extra damage or, you know, being able to sense some stuff through walls, it doesn't feel like you're significantly changing your gameplay when you change a character. And not only that, because you can only have one of any given character, if somebody likes playing the character that you like to play, which for me would be Doc, and Doc is almost a requirement in every run if you want to actually make it decently far, because the free heals that she gives on top of stacking your heal percentages really does come in clutch. She also gives the entire team extra trauma resistance, so you don't lose access to health nearly as fast, and a lot of people will pick her, but if I'm not playing Doc, I honestly don't care too much to be playing in the first place, and that's part of the issue with the multiplayer here, is that people can just leave and there's not going to be a penalty to them. If you're playing the character that they want to play, which I tend to be doing, they can just leave, and you'll see in a couple of these different sections of film that I've managed to get for the game where people have just left and I never got anybody to drop back in. I just made it through a couple of what was supposed to be multiplayer missions with some bots, but because I'm on the easiest difficulty, because I can't trust anybody on the normal difficulty, I can at least make it through that with bots. It wouldn't be a zombie shooter game with character design without talking about the zombies themselves and the special infected in particular. The zombies in general tend to have pretty good design. They don't all look exactly the same. I mean, there are plenty of just copy-pasted, face palettes here and there, but on the whole, you get a decent variety. Where there is a lack of variety is actually in the special infected. And the way that this manifests is making a lot of your runs feel the same, because it almost feels like you see some of the same special infected at the same points, because I mean, what else really are they going to stick there? And based on the pain points that the special infected give, as I've elaborated earlier with their lack of weak points, they're far too high of HP early, with it feeling like you're going to run into bullet sponges at certain parts, you can really feel overwhelmed or even underwhelmed if you happen to be slightly overkitted or your teammates are actually good. Then it really does just take away from the experience there, and you don't get that variety in characters, at least zombie characters, with the special infected, because you have tall boys, exploders, vomiters, hawkers, stalkers, and the other one that spits at you but isn't like a acid spit pool. Can't remember the name of that one. But it doesn't really give you varying gameplay, because they're all just bullet sponges, have hard to hit weak spots or none at all, and they get to deal their damage to you before you can defend yourself, and they're going to get away with it every time. So at the end of the day, there's not really a lot of variance in the gameplay that the special infected bring, and there's not a lot of variance in the special infected themselves. And while the game may have great music and set-piece music to really put you in the mood for what's going on a lot of the times, there is definitely an issue with the audio cues for what's going on around you. In a game like this, you can't always be looking the right direction to notice when something's going on or when something's happening. And in other games like Left 4 Dead 2, when there's a smoker, you're going to hear the coughing. When there's a hunter, you hear the hunter screaming. When there's a spitter, you hear some of that coughing and phlegm, as well as a chime, the actual audio cue music that they play. In Vermintide 2, there's rustling and jangling of little wooden pieces when a snatcher is somewhere nearby, and you can tell. There's little whispers that you can hear when there's an assassin about to jump nearby you guys. There are options, and there's always ways to identify that there's danger before it hits you, so that you can actually react within a meaningful amount of time and actually save yourself. Whereas in this game, you're not going to know, they're going to hit you, or you're going to focus on it, and because they're such bullet sponges, they might hit you anyways, and it really feels like you get warned about everything too late. You almost have to wait for your character's audio cues, which they normally won't do until they're engaging the enemy, which at that point, you've already wasted time engaging the enemy, and they've already probably started to attack you, which puts the rest of your team on the back foot for even engaging these enemies. So there's just not a whole lot of thought put into how you interact with specials and how they interact with you in your run, which is unfortunate, because they are actually a centerpiece of this game, and they are required to actually make some of these things difficult, but they use way too many infected. They have way too much health, special infected, and you really don't get a lot of variety or a meaningful way to have counterplay against them. So to wrap up the package, this, unfortunately for Turtle Rock Studios, just isn't a $60 game to me, and I feel that's what a lot of the consensus is around the internet. And if I'm being honest, it's probably the most Games Pass game I've ever seen. It's fun to just spend some non-serious time in on your favorite character, getting your supply points, finishing a mission, getting out, and upgrading your supply lines to get more cards to put in your deck. It's most fun when it's not taken seriously, and that really is to the game's own detriment, because at its heart, it's developed like a roguelike, and you don't get to experience that roguelike endgame or progression unless you stick through all of these missions to build up your character's number of cards in a run. And the game doesn't promote that playstyle in its own integrated systems, which is really unfortunate, because Turtle Rock Studios could have really, with just a little more thought, hit the spot with this game. It, in its current state, really offers a actual compelling romp into the experience, and you get to actually have fun in that co-op horde-based shooter. If that's what you're looking for, this game actually does offer it, but it doesn't offer it at that $60 price tag. This makes it at least worth the Games Pass download, so you can at least play it for a while and really feel it out, but maybe just not that full game price. I do believe after a few months of retooling some systems and AI, Turtle Rock Studios could really have something great here. Maybe with also some in-game additions of some things that make your runs more impactfully variable from run to run. I completely believe that once this game is fully realized, it'll probably be a standout experience. But as it stands, the biggest, baddest, newest co-op horde shooter to date is stuck in the shadow of the proven and timeless titles in the genre that, still to this day, maintain an active community and player base to keep the games alive and thriving. Thank you guys for watching my over 30-minute analysis of this game if you made it this far. And if you have and you enjoyed it, give me a like and subscribe. Always look for more of those. And yeah, have a great day.